the power of writers is when we have the ear of those in power. And when we lose that, which is why I think that the book banners in the world are fighting so hard to remove our power right now, because God forbid it gets into the ear of the leaders and the world changes for the better.
Or informs future leaders, future thinkers.
That's exactly right. Just before we came on, I was going through social media, and how come I can't pull it up now? Give me 1 second. And I came across an Instagram of someone who I'd never followed, and his name is Joseph Awuha Darko, and he is an artist and social entrepreneur and philanthropist in Ghana. And he wrote this, and I think it's perfect for what we're talking about. He wrote, "Dear artists, no one is listening to politicians. No one is listening to scientists. So suddenly, the arts bear this huge responsibility to reflect what is happening in the world." And I think that's what we've always done, but now more than ever, it's important because people aren't listening to what used to be called authority. And we're among the only voices they're still listening to.
Yeah, it's like they're not trusting it, right? Like they're it's not just that they're not listening to them, they're not trusting, and sometimes with good reason, sometimes for ill reason, yeah. And I think
and say, which is why it's interesting that suddenly we're on strike and not allowed to work if we are television or film writers or actors, like the voices are being shut down.
Yeah.
I really resonated with what you said, Sherri, just in terms of like the disappointment and disillusionment, because I think like I've seen that a lot. I think we're all aware like the traditional social structures that maybe our parents or our grandparents relied on just aren't there. In particular, like a lot of people are moving away from religion, right? And organized religion. And a lot of people like the social safety net isn't so strong. Like the cost of living is so much higher now. All these things, are making life harder for people. And, that we've, like society itself is saying, well, why can't you do all these things? And then you're constantly running up against this disappointment. And I think it's like, it's happening on a much, much larger scale. And I think that, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to say that no one is listening to scientists and no one is listening to politicians, but I do think that certainly there has been a large anti-science movement, more so in the past few years. But on the other hand, like, because this is supposed to be like a hope panel, right? Is like, I do see like, and maybe it's just that it's the particular, my interest, but I see like a whole lot of science YouTube channels that have popped up in the last few years, like really, really good ones too. And not just like, superficial stuff, pop science, but just like really detailed stuff. There's one guy, Anton Petrov, who does a daily science YouTube thing, and it's just like he finds a really interesting paper and talks about it for 10 or 15 minutes. And there's a lot of stuff like that on the internet, and it's just like I feel like it's just maybe it's not reaching enough people.
I think that's an excellent point, Matthew, because what we've seen, social media, the internet, there's so many voices, and we hear a lot of these voices of negativity, but there's so many more voices of hope. It is a frighteningly democratic process to throw yourself into the public sphere like that. And I think that what we as people don't recognize is how much power we actually have. And I'm not just talking about us as writers or as artists in general. I'm talking about everybody. We all have so much power, but we've been told with these individualistic stories of, a lone savior hero who will come and take care of it for us, that we need to just sort of, everything will be, we can wait. We have the luxury of sitting back, and we don't. We all have to get into this together. And when you really break down society, you see that really it's only about 30% of society are the people who we would go, ooh, you're scary. Like that's authoritarianism, that's fascism, that's, theocracy, that's the stuff where you go, no, but they're very loud. And we have to learn how to be as loud, if not louder.
Nisi,
I saw. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that's why, I felt very hopeful in terms of storytelling in the future, being on the strike lines, and sort of fighting for telling that story, telling stories and fighting against the idea of this sort of mono culture that the fears of AI and all of that coming in and sort of keeping stories human, to be able to tell those smaller stories that give us hope and help. And the other thing is, maybe I'll just take a moment to mention the hopeful thing that I see with so I've been doing this solar system ambassador thing with NASA, where, it's sort of a citizen volunteer who goes around and talks about, our solar system and the space program, and how those explorations of our home space is very helpful and hopeful to how we can help our planet down the line with all of the science and the space science that we're doing. And I find that to be really inspiring in terms of springboards for stories, especially with working with kids.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to counter the kind of negativity and like horrible things going on in the world with beautiful things and with optimistic things and things of hope. And I think it's like, for me, I know that when there's situations going on in my life and in the world like they are now, I find those types of things really grounding. Like oh my God, this situation in the Middle East right now has me really on edge. And then I'm like, oh, but I can listen to a science podcast and like someone's talking about, some of the discoveries that JWST made this month. They found these, free floating planets, like, not around any star, and they were binary planets. And I'm like, that is the coolest thing I think I've ever seen this year. So it's like that type of stuff, just like, it's a little cliche, but like Mr. Rogers once said, he's like, when there's a catastrophe, look for the helpers, right? And it's kind of like that. It's like when things are bad in the world, you look towards the people that are like doing better things.